Have you ever watched a movie and thought, I know where that was shot? Or maybe there's a location in a film and you think you know where it is, but you can't quite put your finger on it? Well, welcome to On Location, the program that aims to find out who, where, when, and how. I'm standing in London's Diamond District, Hatton Garden. This sets the scene for a tale of murder, lust, revenge, greed, and fish. This exact spot is used in the opening sequence for A Fish Called Wanda.
Well, the whole project for A Fish Called Wanda goes back to the early 80s when John Cleese was, he had his own company called Video Arts, which was making training films for professionals, and he recruited Charles Crichton to work directing some of those training films. I mean, he respected Crichton from those early Ealing days when he'd made Lavender Hill Mob. So for Cleese to work with Crichton, it was a bit of an honour, a bit of a thrill, I think. So they were working together in the early 80s, and I think Cleese spoke to Crichton about his idea for A Fish Called Wanda as early as about 1983, just in vague terms, and just talked around the subject, saying he thought he had an idea for a comedy.
The story is based around 4 characters that are brought together because of a connection with an armed robbery. Frustrated barrister Archie is played by John Cleese. Double-crossing flirt Wanda is played by Jamie Lee Curtis. The psychotic Nietzsche-reading Otto is played brilliantly by Kevin Kline. Lastly, Michael Palin plays the loyal, animal-loving Ken. Ealing veteran Charles Crichton was brought out of retirement to direct Wanda. He'd made everything from the Lavender Hill Mob to the hit 60s TV series The Avengers. And with those credentials, the right man for the job. This rather unusual bunch of would-be lawbreakers strike at the building just behind me, where they help themselves to several large diamonds. The result of careful planning, do we think?
This is the big one, so...
Okay.
Yeah. Otto?
Yes?
Okay.
What?
The plan.
Yeah, great. No problem. What was the middle thing about the police?
I think it's time to move on to our next location, which, as it happens, is just down the road.
I love robbing the English. They're so polite.
What is it, Ken?
The dog!
We didn't hit the dog, Ken. It's okay.
$20 million. He's worried about an insect.
It's not
Stutter's not getting any better, is it, Ken? Have you thought about surgery?
Shut up.
Shut up!
Ken? Hi.
That getaway scene was shot here, at Clerkenwell Close and Roberts Place. This must have seemed a very glamorous location to Jamie Lee Curtis and Kevin Kline. Only the graffiti have changed.
Cleese had been preparing the film since about 83, 84. And what he'd be doing was he'd be talking to Kevin Kline and Jamie Lee Curtis about their characters, then coming back to the UK and working with Charles Crichton on the script, and keeping on talking to the pair of them about how their characters might develop. Cleese had worked with Kevin Kline on Silverado, the Western film, the Lawrence Kasdan Western film. So he knew about Kline's abilities to handle sort of comic timing, but Kline hadn't really adapted it that further, and this was a chance for him to go a bit further and really sort of push the boundaries of his comic abilities. And equally, Jamie Lee Curtis was more known as a scream queen through Halloween and all those sorts of films, and she'd made Perfect with John Travolta, but again this was a different move for her. So they both relished the chance to, not just to work with Cleese, who they got to know over the years, but also to sort of expand their areas into comedy, but also to sort of develop the characters, which is quite unusual. In cinema at that time, he would be talking to them over a certain period, and they would give input into the characters. So when it came to getting ready to shoot, they could come over to the UK and have a brief period of rehearsal, and they knew pretty much where their characters were. So I think it was clear that Cleese didn't really have anybody else in mind. He knew who he wanted to work with. He'd sort of touched base with them, and he was developing their characters over a period.
In the movie, John Cleese's character is called Archie Leach, which happens to be the real name of Cary Grant. And John Cleese and Cary Grant both come from Weston-super-Mare. Is this a coincidence, do we think? Here we see Wanda getting to know Archie.
I knew it! You're Archie Leach.
Leach.
Right. I saw you in court 2 weeks ago.
The casino break-in?
Oh, you were great!
Well,
Oh, I'm a big fan of yours. I love the way you cross-examine. Oh, I really admire your work.
thank you.
Well, I better not
suppose
keep
you've
you
got-
anymore.
No, fine, right. Well,
Thank you for this. I'll treasure it.
au revoir.
You speak French, too.
Asked why he had chosen the character name, Cleese replied, "Because I was born 20 miles from where the real Archie Leach came from, and it's the nearest thing I'll ever get to being Cary Grant."
Given the fact that Cleese had written the script and was co-directing the film, it was clear to see that he wanted to give himself some good bits in the movie. You have to remember that when the film was being shot, Charles Crichton was something like 77 years old. I mean, he worked in all the classic Ealing films, but he wasn't as mobile as he was some time before. So he would basically do a lot of the camera setups, and Cleese would do a lot of work with the actors in terms of the script and the comedy. So when Cleese was writing it, he wrote himself as this rather sweet and endearing, slightly bumbling barrister. But what he also did was pump a bit of iron to get himself buffed up for the scenes where he has to be naked around the house. And I think for the first time in his career, when he'd spent a lot of years doing Ministry of Silly Walks and things like that, he now found himself as in the odd position of being a sex symbol in British cinema, which I think was quite strange for him at the time.
Wanda and her so-called brother Otto have set up George, who is the brains behind the robbery. And he soon finds himself on trial at the Old Bailey, defended by the unsuspecting Archie Leach.
Was there anyone else present that morning?
Yes, George was there,
Thank you.
but he left about 5 to 7.
Wanda. I wonder.
How do you shoot a court scene inside the Old Bailey when obviously you can't get in there to film? You cheat, of course. The exteriors are in the film, but the interiors were filmed at Oxford Town Hall.
This was a major project for British cinema at that time, because in the 80s, British cinema was going through a pretty awful time. You'd had all the Revolution fiasco, and Goldcrest had sort of gone under. So you had a time when British cinema was pretty much in the doldrums. But one of the high points had been the Monty Python team, and they'd made all their various movies. But at this time, they'd set up their own production company, Prominent Features, and it was through Prominent that A Fish Called Wanda was made. And they took it to MGM, who decided to take the risk. But obviously they got American talent on board, and that would ease any risk for an American company investing a substantial sum in a quite broad British comedy, as it must have looked on paper. But they knew they had Klein, and they knew they had Jamie Lee Curtis, and they knew John Cleese was known around the world through the Monty Python team, as was Michael Palin. So in that sense, it was a pretty good bet. But equally, British cinema at that time wasn't in the best of states.
I think it's time for a spot of movie trivia. When Otto suggests some possible informers that may have set up George, he mentions one Kevin Delaney. These are Klein's first and middle names. The famous window hanging scene was filmed at the then undeveloped Reed's Wharf. In the film, the flat is given an E1 postal address, putting it north of the Thames, but it has a view of Tower Bridge from the south side. John Cleese won a BAFTA award for Best Actor, and Michael Palin won the Best Supporting Actor. Kevin Kline won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor.
I think, I mean, in lots of ways, the film could have worked if it had been set in New York, because in one sense, it's a comedy, it's a caper comedy with a bit of a few sexual elements. It doesn't really rely on classic British locations. But equally, you couldn't have had Cleese's character, a rather sort of repressed, odd English barrister. You couldn't have. It'd be very hard to see how you could translate that into a New York figure. So it would have. I mean, it could have worked anywhere else. But I think it's somehow those elements are the ones which gives it that extra edge. The fact that Jamie Lee Curtis is intrigued by this rather sweet, bumbling barrister, and the fact that Otto can't understand anything that the English are about, and that's his wonderful confusion about the London Underground being a subversive group and all these sorts of little elements. They give it that little twist. As a caper comedy, you could set it anywhere, but I think it needs to have those slightly English elements to really make it work.
Unfortunately for George, there was a witness to the robbery, a Mrs. Cody, played by Patricia Hayes. Unfortunately for Mrs. Cody, George has asked the ever-loyal Ken to take care of her.
Smell, Maggie, smell. Now. Kill.
Of course, it wasn't a real dog. But it was here in Onslow Gardens, South Kensington, that Ken tried unsuccessfully to silence poor old Mrs. Cody. Mrs. Cody lived there at number 69. After the first bungled attempt, Ken has another go, using a different approach and an ingenious disguise to boot. Meanwhile, Archie is hooking up with Wanda to discuss law, and Otto, the self-made philosopher, has invited himself along too. This next scene, involving the romantic twosome, was filmed at New Concordia Wharf, Bermondsey Wall West. Or maybe I should make that threesome.
How come a girl as bright as you could have a brother who's so...
Don't call me stupid.
Mike! Jesus Christ!
I'll deal with you later.
What have you done with her?
She's all right.
Otto!
Now, apologize. You're really sorry.
I'm really, really sorry. I apologize unreservedly.
You take it back.
I do. I offer a complete and utter retraction. The imputation was totally without basis in fact and was in no way fair comment and was motivated purely by malice. And I deeply regret any distress that my comments may have caused you or your family. And I hereby undertake not to repeat any such slander at any time in the future.
It's nice to see the British and the Americans getting on so well. But what has Ken been up to in Onslow Gardens? Now we move on to our last location in the film, the world's busiest airport, Heathrow. Let's catch up on all four characters as they try to double-cross each other.
Yes, we can just do it, Mr. Leach.
Great.
Luggage?
Don't really need any.
Gate 14.
Thank you.
Ciao, stupidissimo.
I think I'll leave you with a simple thought. Never trust a man driving a steamroller. See you next time.
You know your problem? You don't like winners.
Winners?
Yeah. Winners.
Winners like North Vietnam?
Shut up! We did not lose Vietnam. It was a tie.
I'm telling you, baby, they kicked your little ass there. Boy, they whooped your hide real good.
No, they didn't.
Oh, yes, they did.
Oh, no, they didn't.
Oh, yes, they did.
Oh, no, they didn't. Shut up! Goodbye, Archie.
You gonna shoot me?
Yes. Yes, afraid so, old chap. Sorry.
Look, Otto, look!
Revenge! It's Ken! Coming to kill me! How are you gonna catch me, Ken? Now, where was I? Oh, yeah.